The room was loud, but her hands were quiet. They trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter, careful not to crease the paper, as if it were something fragile, something that could break if handled too roughly. The envelope had already been opened, but she hesitated before reading again, like she already knew what was coming and wasn't sure she could handle it twice. She read the first line. Her breathing changed. Not a gasp, not a sob, just a pause too long to be normal. Her eyes moved slowly across the page, then stopped. For a moment she didn't blink. Then her lips pressed together, tight, as if she were trying to hold something back. It didn't work. A tear slipped down her cheek uninvited. She quickly wiped it away with the side of her hand, glancing around to see if anyone had noticed. People nearby were smiling, talking, laughing. Cameras flashed in the background. This was supposed to be a happy place, a public place, the kind of place where emotions like this didn't belong. But the letter didn't care. She read another line. Her shoulders sank, just a little, like the weight of the words had finally landed. Her grip loosened, and the paper shook more now. She tried to steady it, but her fingers betrayed her. Across the room, Keanu Reeves noticed. He hadn't been watching her at first. His attention was elsewhere, signing something, listening politely, nodding the way he always did. But something about the shift in her posture caught his eye. Not the tears. Not yet. It was the way she suddenly seemed alone, surrounded by people, yet completely separate from them. Keanu's gaze settled on her, calm and unreadable. She lowered the letter slightly, as if embarrassed by it, as if emotions were something she needed to apologize for. Another tear fell, this one faster, hitting the paper and leaving a small dark mark near the bottom of the page. She froze. Carefully she folded the letter halfway, then stopped. Her hands hovered there, unsure. Fold it and pretend everything was fine. Or keep reading and let whatever this was finish what it started. Her jaw tightened. She inhaled through her nose, slow and controlled, the way people do when they're trying not to fall apart in public. Keanu was still watching, not staring, not intruding, just present. The noise around them faded into something distant and dull, like it belonged to another room entirely. In that moment, it felt like the space between them had narrowed, pulled together by something invisible but heavy. She glanced up. Their eyes met briefly, and in that instant, her expression changed. Not panic, not fear, recognition. As if she suddenly realized she wasn't carrying this moment alone anymore. She looked back down at the letter, unfolded it again, and read on, this time without trying to hide the tears. Have you ever read something that instantly broke you, no matter where you were? Keanu didn't move, but something about the way he stood made it clear. Whatever was written in that letter mattered more than anyone in the room realized. The venue looked exactly the way moments like this were supposed to look. Bright lights, clean floors, soft music humming through hidden speakers, people standing in loose lines, clutching programs and phones, whispering to each other with excitement. Smiles everywhere. This was the kind of place where memories were meant to be made. The good kind. The kind people talked about later with warmth in their voices. No one expected anything heavy to happen here. Staff members moved efficiently from one side of the room to the other, guiding guests, keeping everything smooth and orderly. A few people laughed too loudly, nerves mixing with excitement. Others rehearsed what they would say when it was finally their turn. For most of them, this moment had been anticipated for weeks, maybe months. For her, it was different. She stood slightly off to the side, not fully in line, not fully out of it either. Close enough to be part of the scene, but distant enough to feel detached from it. The letter was still in her hands now, folded again, held carefully against her chest as if it needed protection. Or maybe she did. Around her, conversations floated by in fragments. Can you believe he's actually here? I don't know what I'll say when I see him. I hope I don't embarrass myself. Normal thoughts, normal reactions. She didn't join in. Her focus stayed inward, locked onto the words she had just read, and the ones she hadn't yet found the courage to face again. The sounds around her blurred together, becoming background noise, present, but meaningless. Keanu Reeves moved through the space with his usual quiet ease. There was no rush in him, no sense of performance. He greeted people one by one, listening more than he spoke, offering small smiles, brief comments, simple kindness. Nothing about his presence demanded attention, yet somehow it always drew it. People leaned in when he spoke. They laughed a little softer. Even the room seemed to adjust its rhythm around him. But his attention kept drifting back to her, not because she was loud, Not because she was making a scene, because she wasn't. There was a stillness about her that didn't match the rest of the room, a tension that didn't belong in a place like this. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, then back again, as if unsure whether to stay or leave. Her eyes flicked toward the exit once, then away. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The letter pressed lightly against her chest, a reminder she couldn't ignore. From the outside, no one would have guessed anything was wrong. She wasn't crying openly now. Her face was composed. Controlled. If someone glanced her way, they might assume she was just nervous, overwhelmed in a good way. Only someone paying close attention would notice the signs. The way her shoulders stayed tense, the way her fingers kept tracing the edge of the folded paper, the way she swallowed, again and again, like she was holding something back. Keanu noticed all of it. He had seen this kind of quiet struggle before, not in this setting, not exactly like this, but enough to recognize it. The kind of moment where someone looks fine until you really look at them. The kind of moment that doesn't ask for attention, but needs it anyway. He didn't approach her. Not yet. Instead, he allowed the moment to breathe. The line moved forward. One person stepped away, another took their place. Applause rippled briefly through the room as someone finished their interaction, then faded. The rhythm continued, steady and predictable. She remained where she was. Time stretched in an odd way. Minutes felt longer, heavier, filled with unspoken thoughts. The letter stayed folded, unopened, like a door she wasn't sure she wanted to walk through again. Keanu finished speaking with someone and straightened, his posture relaxed but alert. His eyes found her once more. This time, she didn't look away. There was no panic in her expression, no demand. Just a quiet question that hadn't been spoken yet. The contrast between them and the room around them grew sharper. Laughter on one side, silence on the other. Celebration everywhere except in the small space she occupied. And somehow, without a single word exchanged, it became clear that this wasn't just another fan moment. This was something else, something private unfolding in a very public place. She drew a slow breath, unfolded the letter again just slightly, and glanced down at it, just enough to see the first line. Her eyes softened. Keanu took one small step forward, not toward her, but closer than before. Close enough to signal awareness. Close enough to say, without speaking, that he had noticed. The room continued around them unaware, but the balance had shifted. Whatever that letter held, whatever weight it carried, was no longer contained entirely within her hands. And the moment was moving, slowly, inevitably, toward something that couldn't be ignored much longer. She had told herself she wouldn't read it again. Once was enough. More than enough. The words had already done what they needed to do. Opened something she had spent years keeping closed. Folding the letter had felt like a small act of control, a way to put distance between herself and the rush of emotion that had followed. But distance didn't last. Her fingers loosened almost on their own, easing the paper open just a fraction. She didn't read the whole page this time. Just one line. The same one her eyes had returned to before. The one that refused to let go. Her chest tightened. It wasn't sadness exactly. Not the kind that comes from loss or bad news. This was something more complicated. Something heavier in a quieter way. The kind of feeling that sits deep and doesn't ask permission. She remembered where she had been when she first received the letter. It had arrived unexpectedly, slipped into her mailbox among bills and advertisements. She had almost ignored it then, too. Almost tossed it aside for later. But something about the handwriting, uneven, careful, unmistakably human, had made her stop. Now, standing here, surrounded by people and noise, that same handwriting pulled her backward in time. Her grip tightened again. She shifted her stance, angling her body slightly away from the crowd, instinctively protecting the page from curious eyes. This wasn't meant for anyone else, not really. It wasn't meant for a room full of strangers, or flashing cameras, or whispered excitement. It was meant for her, and for one other person. She swallowed and read another line. Her vision blurred, not from tears this time, but from the weight of recognition. A memory surfaced, sharp and sudden. A moment she hadn't thought about in years. A moment she had once dismissed as insignificant. Apparently it hadn't been. Her breathing grew shallow. She forced herself to slow it down, counting quietly in her head. In. Again. She had learned how to do this long ago, back when she needed to keep herself steady in public. Back when showing too much emotion felt dangerous, old habits returned easily. She pressed her lips together and lifted her gaze, just briefly scanning the room. Everything looked the same as it had moments ago. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Keanu Reeves remained a few steps away, still engaged with the flow of people, but not fully. There was a subtle shift in the way he stood now, an awareness that hadn't been there before. His attention wasn't fixed on her constantly, but it didn't stray far either. She felt it. That quiet sense of being seen, not watched, not examined, but noticed. It made her uncomfortable in a way she couldn't explain. And strangely, it also made it easier to keep going. Her eyes dropped back to the letter. This time she didn't rush. She read slowly, letting each sentence settle before moving to the next. The words were simple. There was no dramatic language, no exaggeration. That was part of what made them so powerful. Whoever had written this hadn't tried to impress or perform. They had just told the truth. Her truth. The letter spoke of a moment that had once seemed small. A brief interaction. A few words spoken at the right time. Nothing that would stand out in a highlight reel. Nothing she had ever expected to matter beyond that day. But it had. It had mattered more than she realized. Her throat tightened again, and this time she didn't fight the tears as hard. One slipped free, then another. She brushed them away, frustrated with herself, but less concerned now about who might see. Have you ever discovered that something you thought was insignificant actually changed your life? The question lingered in her mind, unspoken but heavy. She folded the letter carefully, aligning the edges, smoothing the crease with her thumb. The gesture was slow and deliberate, as if giving herself a moment to breathe, to decide. Because there was a choice in front of her now, whether she liked it or not. She could keep this to herself. She could tuck the letter away, thank Keanu politely if she reached him, and walk out of the room carrying the weight alone. No one would know. No one would question it. The world would keep moving. Or, she glanced up again. This time, Keanu wasn't looking at her. The line had shifted. Someone stepped aside. There was a brief opening, an unplanned pause in the flow of the room. The kind of pause that feels accidental until it isn't. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the folded paper, and she took a small step forward without fully committing to it. Her heart pounded now, louder than the room around her. The idea of speaking felt overwhelming, exposing, risky, but so did staying silent. The letter felt heavier than before, not because of its contents, but because of what it represented. Gratitude that had gone unspoken, a connection that had never been acknowledged, a moment that deserved more than quiet tears in a crowded room. She drew a deep breath. For the first time since opening the letter, she wasn't just reacting to it. She was preparing to do something about it. And whatever she chose next would change the direction of this moment, for both of them. Reeves noticed the shift before anything else happened. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden movement, no raised voice. Just a subtle change in the way she stood. The way her weight shifted forward instead of back. The kind of movement people make when they've already decided something internally, even if they haven't acted on it yet. He recognized it instantly. Keanu had spent most of his life around people, crowds, cameras, attention, but he had also learned to read the quiet moments most people missed, the pauses between words, the hesitation before a choice, the look someone gets when they're standing at the edge of something important. That's where she was now. He didn't rush toward her. He didn't interrupt the flow of the room or draw attention to her struggle. That wasn't his way. Instead, he adjusted his stance slightly, turning his body just enough that she fell fully within his line of sight. Not as a signal, as a permission. If she stepped forward, he would be there. The people around them remained unaware. A staff member gestured for the next guest. Someone laughed nervously nearby. A camera lens shifted position, searching for the next smile, the next safe moment to capture. None of it touched the space between them. Keanu finished the interaction in front of him with the same calm he always carried. He thanked the person, nodded, and took a half step back, subtle, almost unnoticeable. But it created room. Space that hadn't existed a moment before. He didn't call out to her, didn't wave her over, didn't make the moment public. He simply waited. She noticed. Her breath caught, not sharply, but enough to register. The decision she had been circling now stood directly in front of her. There was no pressure in his posture, no expectation written on his face. If anything, he looked grounded, steady. Like someone who understood that some things couldn't be rushed. That steadiness mattered more than she realized. She took another step forward. Keanu's expression didn't change. No surprise, no curiosity that might feel invasive. Just calm awareness, like he had known this was coming the moment he saw the letter in her hands. As she moved closer, he lowered his voice slightly, not to whisper, but to keep the moment contained. "You okay?" he asked, 2 words, no assumptions, no demands. The simplicity of it nearly undid her. She nodded once too quickly, then paused, reconsidered, and shook her head just as slightly. Honest, even if it wasn't neat. Her voice faltered. She stopped, inhaled, and tried again. "I didn't expect this." Keanu nodded, accepting the explanation without asking for more. "That happens," he said gently. He didn't reach for the letter, didn't look at it directly. His eyes stayed on her face, attentive but not intense. The message was clear: you decide what comes next. Around them, the room kept moving, but the distance felt intentional now, as if the noise had been pushed just far enough away to give the moment room to breathe. She held the letter out, hesitated, then pulled it back slightly. It's not bad," she said, almost defensively. "It's just a lot." "I understand," Keanu replied. And somehow, she believed him. There was no rush in him. No need to fix or resolve anything immediately. He stood with the kind of patience that comes from knowing some moments don't need answers right away. They just need space. She glanced down at the letter again, then back up at him. Her hands were steadier now. Not calm, but steadier. His presence had shifted something, not by force, but by balance. "You don't have to explain," he added quietly, "unless you want to." That was it, the offer, the boundary, the respect. She exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time since she'd opened the envelope. For a brief second, she closed her eyes, as if gathering the courage she needed. When she opened them again, there was resolve there. Keanu noticed that too. He leaned back just enough to give her room, signaling that whatever she chose to say, or not say, would be met without judgment. His body language stayed open, relaxed, grounded. This wasn't a performance. This was a private moment happening in plain sight. She looked at the letter one last time, then folded it neatly and held it between them, no longer pressed to her chest. The gesture felt symbolic, even if she didn't fully understand why yet. "I've been carrying this for a while," she said softly. "Longer than I thought." Keanu listened without interrupting, without correcting, without trying to define it for her. Sometimes presence was the most powerful response. The room around them faded further, reduced to movement without meaning. What remained was a simple exchange built on patience, restraint, and an unspoken understanding that whatever came next would be handled carefully. Keanu gave a small nod, not as encouragement, but as acknowledgement. "Whenever you're ready." And for the first time since the letter had arrived in her life, she felt like she might actually be ready to finish what it had started. She unfolded the letter again, this time fully, not in a rush, not with shaking hands. The movement was slower now, deliberate, as if she had accepted that whatever was written there deserved to be faced properly. The paper made a soft sound as it opened, louder than it should have been in the quiet space between them. Keanu didn't look at the letter. He watched her. Her eyes moved across the page, stopping briefly at certain lines, lingering there as if they carried more weight than the rest. Her lips parted slightly, and she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "This," she said, then stopped. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that isn't happiness exactly, but something close to relief. "This was written years ago." Keanu nodded once, inviting her to continue. She lowered the letter just enough to look at him. "I didn't think it mattered anymore," she admitted. "I thought it was just a moment." She glanced back down. The letter described a brief encounter. Nothing dramatic, no grand gesture, just a few words spoken at the right time, when she had been standing at a crossroads in her life, unsure, exhausted, ready to walk away from something she had worked years to build. Back then, she hadn't said much. She hadn't explained what those words meant to her. She had simply nodded, thanked him, and moved on. Keanu's brow furrowed slightly, not in confusion, but recognition. She continued, her voice steadier now. "I almost quit that day. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even admit it to myself." A small laugh escaped her, soft and self-aware. "I thought if I kept it quiet, it wouldn't be real." She looked at the letter again. But whoever wrote this, they remembered. She swallowed. They remembered exactly what was said, how it sounded, where we were standing. Keanu shifted his weight subtly, grounding himself. "People remember moments that save them," he said quietly. The words landed gently, but they landed. Her eyes filled again, though this time the tears didn't spill over immediately. "That's the thing," she said. "I didn't realize it saved me until much later." She took a breath. This letter is from the person I became because I didn't quit. The space between them held the truth of that sentence. She didn't rush to fill it. The letter wasn't about loss. It wasn't about tragedy. It wasn't even about gratitude in the way people usually expect. It was about survival disguised as a small kindness. She folded the letter carefully and held it out, not pushing it toward him, just making it visible. "You probably don't remember," she said. "I wouldn't expect you to." Keanu shook his head gently. "I remember pieces," he said honestly. "Not always the details." "That's okay," she replied. "You weren't supposed to remember. I just needed you to know." Her voice wavered on the last word. "No." Keanu took that in. He didn't deflect it, didn't minimize it, didn't joke to soften the weight. He simply accepted it the way it was offered. "I'm glad you stayed," he said after a moment. "Not I'm glad I helped. Not you're welcome. Just that." She nodded, emotion finally breaking through her control. Tears slipped free now, but they were quieter than before. Cleaner. Like something heavy had been set down instead of carried. Around them, the room still moved. People talked. Staff-guided cameras flashed. But the energy had shifted. Someone nearby paused, sensing something different. Another person lowered their voice instinctively. No one knew the details, but they felt the gravity of the moment. Keanu noticed and adjusted again, stepping just slightly to the side, shielding her from attention without making it obvious. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but intentional. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. Not an explanation, not a reaction. She smiled through tears. "I know," she said. "This wasn't about owing. It was about closing a circle." She held the letter once more, then slipped it back into the envelope. This time the motion felt final, complete. Keanu nodded, understanding without needing clarification. Whatever that letter had carried for years had finally been placed where it belonged, out in the open, acknowledged, and released. And in that quiet exchange, something rare happened. A moment of kindness returned to its source. Not with applause, not with recognition, but with truth. And that was more than enough. The moment didn't end with applause. There was no dramatic pause, no crowd reaction, no sudden shift in attention. Life around them continued the way it always had. People moving forward, conversations restarting, the quiet rhythm of a public place reclaiming itself. And somehow that made it more real. She stood there for a second longer, the envelope now sealed in her hand, lighter than it had felt all day. The tears on her face weren't rushed away this time. She didn't apologize for them. She didn't explain them either. She didn't need to. Keanu gave her a small nod, nothing formal, nothing rehearsed, just acknowledgement, respect, the kind that doesn't require words. "You take care," he said simply. She smiled, a genuine one now, not wide, not performative.
"Just steady, Will,"
she replied. And for the first time, she meant it without doubt. She stepped back into the room, blending once again into the movement of people and sound. But she wasn't the same person who had been standing there earlier, clutching a folded piece of paper like it might fall apart. Something had settled. Not everything in life gets closure. Not every emotion finds the right place to land. But sometimes, rarely, you're given a moment that allows you to stop carrying something a moment. This had been that moment. Keanu watched her go for a brief second longer than necessary. Then he turned back toward the next person waiting, offering the same calm presence he always had. No shift in demeanor. No sign that anything unusual had just happened, and yet something had. Not for the room, not for the cameras. For one person and one quiet truth. People often imagine impact as something loud, a speech, a rescue, a turning point that announces itself clearly and dramatically. But real impact doesn't usually look like that. It slips in quietly. It happens when no one is counting, when no one is watching closely enough to turn it into a story. Sometimes it's just a few words spoken at the right time. Sometimes it's the way someone listens without interrupting. Sometimes it's simply being present when another person finally decides to speak. The letter had traveled a long way to arrive at this moment. Not just through time, but through hesitation, doubt, and years of silence. It had waited patiently for the one thing it needed most: acknowledgement. As she moved toward the exit, the noise of the room gradually returned to her awareness. Conversations, laughter, the ordinary chaos of people living their lives. She tucked the envelope safely into her bag, not as something to hide, but as something to keep. A reminder that what feels small to one person can be life-changing to another. That kindness doesn't need witnesses to matter. That the moments we forget are sometimes the moments others build their lives around. Keanu continued on with his day, unaware of how far those words had traveled, or how long they had stayed alive in someone else's memory. And that was fitting, because the most meaningful things don't always circle back for recognition. They simply exist, quietly shaping the world in ways we never fully see. Have you ever changed someone's life without even realizing it? Maybe you have, maybe you will. And maybe, years from now, someone will be holding a letter because of something you once said, without knowing it would ever matter this much.